And we're back at Black Hat 2024, broadcasting out of the Four Seasons. This is our last interview for the day and for the show. So we're going to push through and hopefully have the best conversation yet. I'm with Rakesh Nair. He's Senior Vice President and Engineering and Senior Vice President, Engineering and Product. I read everything that's on the prompt. At a company called Devo. Rakesh, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Rakesh, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got into cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting space, and I think as was finishing my college degree, one of the areas that I wanted to get into was cybersecurity. So been in this space for roughly 25 years now. Currently at Devo. Prior to that, I was CEO and founder of a company called Cognos, which focused on autonomous threat investigations.
Okay.
Before that, I was at RSA NetWitness. I ran all of the engineering teams for the entire SIEM, EDR, NDR portfolio at NetWitness, and different roles before that. I was the chief architect for Juniper firewalls and VPNs, and a bunch of different companies before that, but all in the cybersecurity space.
Gotcha. So how'd you find your way to Devo?
So Devo came through an acquisition of the company that I was mentioning earlier called Cognos.
Mm-hmm.
I think Devo was looking for threat hunting platforms to augment the offering, and so we were one of the only ones out there that did autonomous threat detection, so threat investigation. So I think the acquisition happened in April 2022,
Okay.
and been with Devo ever since.
Great. So how are you finding the show here this week? Do you guys have a booth out there?
Oh, we do have a booth out there, yes. I think a lot of traffic, a lot of interesting new startups, and a lot of technology innovations compared to 3 years back. I think there's a lot of new technology being introduced in the cybersecurity space. We're happy to see some of those things are happening.
Yeah, I've barely been on the floor. I've been out there a couple times yesterday and today because I've been in here doing interviews and other things. But there's always what's the trends, what's the buzz of the year, and obviously AI is everywhere. But beyond that, what I think I've been noticing is a lot more companies that are trying to shift their focus away from vulnerabilities and starting to focus on the threat, which I think overall is a good thing.
Yep.
And obviously, there's probably some overlap there with the intelligent application of AI to threat hunting, threat modeling. What are you guys doing in that space?
Yeah, and before I touch on the AI part, I think there's kind of start off with the trend space, and I think there are 3 trends that I'm observing.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is around data explosion. I think more and more companies want to do data-driven decision making.
Okay.
As a side effect of that, I think there's a lot more data coming to security data platforms.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one trend. The other one I'm observing is around data convergence. It is not as prevalent yet, but there is a few companies who are trying to bring in all of the data into one place, and then have vertical applications built on top of it. So, for instance, security applications or IT ops applications, etc., or even BI, to be built from that single monolith of data that they can manage. And the third trend that I'm seeing is around technology convergence in the security space, especially with respect to threat detection, incident response, etc.
Right.
So I think one of the things we do at Devo is we are envisioning a platform, kind of a security data platform that combines the SIEM, the SOAR, data orchestration pieces, as well as UEBA and some of the AI-driven investigation pieces all into one stack, so that the security analysts can actually take advantage of it and move much faster and smarter. So in that context, I think last year when I was here, I saw a lot of AI, specifically around Gen AI, as Gen AI as the core of the platform, and then doing some aspect of security or the other. Right. But I think this time I see a little bit more of applied Gen AI, which is, my belief is that Gen AI is going to be subsumed into these technology layers and kind of augment what is being done across the technology stack, as opposed to being a standalone model of, here is a Gen AI interface and interact with it. But I think it will kind of be subsumed into different layers, kind of weaving intelligence at different layers to make the system much more smarter and available from a security perspective.
Do you think that's because AI was prematurely hyped, or it is just another
I look at it as
rotation of the hype cycle, as it were?
Last year was a hype cycle for sure. It was at the peak, I think. But and people were trying to figure out practical applications of the of the maturity of LLMs. But I think this year it was more pragmatic use cases, more applied Gen AI use cases that I'm seeing, which I think it's a good evolution. I always thought that it is imbibing some of this into the technology stack is a much more powerful concept as opposed to building something with the Gen AI piece as its core.
It's this is the first time on air, probably between RSA and Black Hat, that actually said AI. So I'm throwing up a little bit in my mouth right now. But it seemed to make sense, because what I'm hearing you say is we're getting beyond the hype and people are actually figuring out what it can and can't do.
Exactly.
It's not the sky is falling, the world's coming to end if the bad guys get their hands on it, and conversely, the good guys, the people that are fighting for the defensive side, are figuring out the limitations and what can we do with it, what's the best way to use it, because at the end of the day, it's another tool.
Exactly. It's another piece of technology that's trying to solve the puzzle of security, security in general, yes.
So, my background is from the DoD and InfoSec, learning the risk equation, being risk is and I'm oversimplifying, a function of vulnerability, threat, and what we used to call countermeasures. And I talk a lot about on our show about everybody's focused on the vulnerability, So I'm actually encouraged that there's more attention to the threat, because to me that's more closer to what security is.
Mm-hmm.
You do all the, hopefully, blocking and tackling, hardening, changing defaults, removing unnecessary services, all that traditional stuff. And at the end of the day, you're watching diligently, in a military context, the wall, but the network, the data, the flows, the repositories, and you're looking for something weird happening. Agree, disagree?
No, I totally agree. I mean, there's kind of basic security hygiene practices, which I put vulnerability management and version upgrades and some of those things into that bucket of things, which is
Sure.
Table stakes for any company to do. But then the next level is around, I think, as we look at data to be the source of more decision making, as we're looking at data to provide us context for what is happening from a security perspective, that here becomes extremely important. And I think there's a lot more companies that I see are starting to use MSSPs, much more than I've observed in the past 2-3 years ago, for example. So they are feeling the need for doing, from a security perspective, collecting the data, having the data in maybe multiple tiers as well. What is kind of the immediate data that I need to look at a threat and understand it pretty quickly? What is it that I need for a deeper IR process to pull in additional context into it? So some of the things I talked around data orchestration goes straight to that problem that we're trying to solve. And there's also been standalone products that have tried to do that filtering and routing of that data for you. But I think over a period of time, as the data is growing exponentially, but the budgets are relatively flat, people are trying to figure out within the same budget constraints, how do I manage this data? So what is hot data, what is warm, what should be cold? And then being able to automatically transfer the data from cold to hot. If you're doing an IR, for instance, okay, for these 3 months of period, I want all of the data to be in warm or hot so I can do queries and understand what the context of the attack is. So that is definitely happening. And the other one I'm looking at is not necessarily just from an LLM perspective, but there are reasoning engines and agents or agent technologies that we can deploy that can interact with the data and understand the data. So the one thing we did at Cognos was it was a Q&A engine that interacts with the data as if a security analyst would interact with the data. So try and ask the question. So almost like if you use a tax software as an example, TurboTax, did you buy a house last year? If the answer is no, it won't ask any more questions of you. But if the answer is yes, then it's okay, what was the down payment? What was the, so they're trying to figure out. So it's a similar piece of technology that we found at Cognos, which is also being integrated into the Devo stack, that will interact with the data on behalf of the analyst and be able to understand and contextualize, not just enrich when an alert fires, but to investigate the. So for example, if someone is running a Python script and connecting to your S3 bucket, to Amazon and changing your S3 bucket permissions, you want the system to understand and tell you the full narrative of what's happening. So that level of intelligence is So I think the combination of bringing data together, managing the data better, and having kind of this intelligent piece of software, and that is a place where Gen AI plays into the stack as well.
Sure.
The combination of kind of bringing the right data, asking the right questions, and understanding what is happening in the environment is going to be crucial, because a lot more CISOs are now demanding of vendors to say, I don't want you to generate alerts that I have to now throw people at to investigate. I want your system. Why can't your system just tell me this is what happened?
Right.
Give me a complete narrative of what happened.
Right. You touched it on a little bit a few moments ago, mentioning that more and more companies are looking to MSSPs. I was going to ask, how does your tools and what you guys are offering at Devo, how do you extend that to the masses? The not enterprises, the SMBs, smaller companies.
Yeah, we were not as much into the SMB space as I would say mid-tier companies, but
Okay.
A lot of MSSPs use Devo as their backend technology today.
Right.
We're a multi-tenant platform. We are completely in AWS cloud, and we are some of the secret sauces that we're agnostic to data, so we can bring in data as quickly as possible
Right.
at really high scales at MSSP levels. So that we definitely see attraction. A lot more MSSPs are using Devo to now protect their customers.
Gotcha.
Not as much, like I said, in the SMB space, but I think mid-tier and even the enterprise space, I see a lot of traction there.
So, edgy question perhaps, but for all the companies that don't have the infrastructure, the teams, the SOCs, but they still need the same basic protection. How do we get that to them? How can they benefit from this type of technology and capability, but in a way that they can access it and afford it?
Yeah, I think one of the things from a design perspective, some of the decisions we made makes us extremely cost effective.
Okay.
From a data management perspective. So that definitely helps. But then there's also, if you go below that tier, we have a lot of MSSP as well as MDR partners that we work with.
Okay.
So we do take some of the customers who are not able to take advantage of these technologies directly. We just basically take them to one of our partners and say, hey, there is a customer, and then we work with MSSPs behind the scenes to enable them to have better security.
I mean that is the best answer that there is to the question. You got to have third parties that are willing to focus and divide up the costs.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost like an insurance policy.
Yeah.
The premiums get paid by thousands, with the expectation that not everybody has to benefit from.
Yeah, we have customers who have thousands of tenants in our MSSP customers as well as MDR customers who have thousands of their tenants residing in Devo today.
Great. We're running out of time. Any parting messages? Anything you want to let our audience know about how to approach you guys and where they should start?
Yeah, I think
Floor is open.
One of the questions I get asked is like, if you want to go pick a SIM, what is the right approach? What should I look for in a SIM, etc. And I think, and there is also this notion that the SIM space is evolving extremely fast, and we see a lot of changes happening in the market, especially this year. So one of the things I'm seeing is that a lot of these SIMs are going to transition into a security data platform, where everything is, like I said, built into the system, not point pieces that you need to bring in. So look for companies who are on that edge, trying to build a security data platform where data orchestration is integrated, the SOAR capability is integrated, some of the autonomous investigation capabilities that I mentioned before is integrated, UEBA, and it all has to work in tandem with each other.
Right.
So that's kind of the evolution of SIM that I see going forward. And if you look at some of the acquisitions that happened recently, it is trying to take kind of the two pieces of different technology or technology vendors who are really good at one or the other piece, and then bring them together to make the technology stack conversions go much faster. So that's my recommendation. Look for companies that are going from a SIM to becoming a security data platform, and then tie up with them as your security partner.
And whatever the choice, Devo's there to
Is the
consume
best.
the data.
Yes.
Great. Well, that's going to do it for us today. Rakesh, thanks for stopping by and telling us about what is going on with Devo and how you're helping to keep companies secure. That's going to wrap us for today, for this week. Again, for information about Devo, go to securityweekly.com/ Devo BH. And for all the shows and interviews we had this week, go to securityweekly.com/black hat. That's going to wrap us. There is an outro coming up and the final wrap, but this is the wrap for the interviews. So thanks for watching.